Today, I am speaking with Keith Baxter and Greg Sims from a new HBO Max project. Would you like to introduce it for the people that are tuning in?
Sure. It's a new Tom and Jerry series called Tom and Jerry in New York, and it's sort of a spin-off or an expansion on the film. You know, where they're in the hotel, and you know more of the details. I don't even know the name of the hotel in New York. But I believe in the movie, Jerry had moved in, and Tom is hired to come get rid of him. But the interesting thing about what Keith was contacted by, I guess, the producers and also by the director to create mini musical episodes, which was a kind of a radical departure. I don't know if it was that Warner Brothers' idea or was that.
That was Warner. Yeah. Okay. So
I'll let you take over.
Okay.
Warner knows more about he knows the people.
They had contacted me a year before. They wanted a whole season of musical episodes, and I was busy on a film at the time, so I had to decline. And then the story supervisor, Will Finn, called me up in last summer and said, I know you already said no to this, but I'm going to ask you again because they really want to do some musicals. And by now I've been working with Greg on a lot of things, and we were just having so much fun working together. So I immediately said yes, just so we could do more stuff together.
In researching a bit about what the two of you have already been saying about working on this project, I saw that you had mentioned that one of the challenging things about working on this is that it had a really fast production schedule. So how do you navigate making sure that you keep the creative spark flowing without allowing that fast production schedule to kind of overwhelm you to the point that you can't create?
Or you can't think about it. You just, you just look down at the page and you write furiously, draw furiously, and compose furiously.
Have breaks and to panic and then come back. And it was mainly Keith was more into the crunch than I was because he was also storyboarding the episodes and writing a story and all that. So it kind of worked out well because when he went off to we had to create the music first, of course, because they're musicals, so the animation needs to follow that. But he's creating the storyboards sort of at the same time that we're sketching out the music. And then by the time we finally have a rough draft of the song, he's able to go off and begin all the storyboarding, which is way more time consuming than creating music. But so while he's doing that, I'm doing, working on the arrangement and orchestration and that. So it's kind of, team effort there. So.
The other thing was I was enjoying this project so much that I just took it upon myself to work 7 days a week on it. Not that I was ever asked to do that, but all I cared about is they'd be as good as they could be. So when I saw these 2 days at the end of the week just staring at me saying, hey, we're not doing anything, I said, okay, I'm going to use you.
Yeah.
And it was just so much fun. I'm not going to say that storyboarding films or TV shows isn't sometimes drudgery, but this was the opposite of that. It was just so much fun, and I felt like we had an opportunity to make something special. And it might be a once in a lifetime opportunity to do one of your favorite characters or two of your favorite characters, and be given the opportunity to do something so extraordinary like this.
And it's a very generational duo, Tom and Jerry. I mean, we watched as kids, our parents watched them as kids, their parents watched them as kids. And I actually, last night, I watched some, HBO Max has some of the, all way back, even black and white Looney Tunes available to stream. So I went back and watched some of the older, like, it must have been in the 40s because there was one sign in the garden that said Victory Garden where he had a vegetable garden. So, these are really go way back, which really does make it a thrill to be able to say you worked on something like that. So iconic.
So with coming up with the score and the music for the stories that you were putting together, how did you decide when to incorporate samples from classical music? Because I mean, I didn't write down every reference that I heard when I was skimming through episodes, but I think at one point there was a little bit of like William Tell overture in there, and there was a lot of other, especially when you got to I think it was dueling pianos, which is such a classic thing in old school animation. So how did you go about deciding when and which ones to use in the stories that you were putting together?
Well, first off, we were told by Warner Brothers that they wanted a cartoon that was like an old Oscar-winning cartoon of Tom and Jerry, where Tom is playing concert piano and Jerry is messing with him. So then I submitted a premise, and they okayed the premise. And then, because this was the first one we did, it was really scary. This is where we developed what became the template for how we did these things. Because normally, when you storyboard a cartoon, you do drawings, you send your file of drawings in to the studio. The editor brings them into a editing software, and he takes it from there. But because everything had to be timed to music, I had to take on doing a rough cut of the cartoon of my storyboards. So we made some educated guesses about how much time it would take to introduce the idea that Tom has this infatuation over Toots, and he goes into this dream of him accompanying her on piano in the lounge in the hotel. Then there's a minimum amount of music you could have and feel like you'd listen to a song. Like if all you heard was a verse, you wouldn't feel like you'd heard a full song. So we settled on a structure for the song that felt like we were really delivering a song from which things would go out of control. Because one thing we know about Tom and his nemesis Butch is they just care about one-upping one another. So the minute that comes on Tom's radar, he forgets about Toots, the girl, just kind of stashes her over here, and then he's just got to beat Butch at playing the piano. So then at that point, Greg and I said, well, what are some of our favorite virtuoso piano pieces? And we just kind of batted them around back and forth. So we did Beethoven and Chopin and Rachmaninoff, and Greg played them all. Pretty amazing.
And I went through, and he said, well, we really need to do the third movement of the Moonlight Sonata. That'd be a great thing. And I think the Grieg thing came up somewhere. That's how it starts. But yeah, and I used to be, I started playing piano when I was 5 years old, and so I've done recitals and kind of fancied myself. I realized pretty quickly that by high school, I was like, I don't want to be a concert pianist, or even if I could be that good, but it still it really helped to know all that literature, to pull from. So as far as the whole approach was so different than all the other Tom and Jerry's, in that mostly those are done, the animation's done, completely finished, everything. And then it's sent to a composer, and he just writes music timed to all the motion. And so that's a whole different thing. This is more about creating a scene that is a musical, and then doing the music, and then hoping the animator syncs the animation to the music at the end. So, but he did such detailed storyboards, it was kind of hard to, it was pretty obvious how to lock that in.
And then Warner Brothers had some input about, well, don't just stay in the classical realm, come forward in time, so you'll hear some stride piano, and then ultimately kind of knockoffs of pop tunes, where when they finally get to the end of this cascade of piano battling,
dueling piano to the extreme.
Well, I mean, having classical music referenced in classic animation is a signature of a lot of those cartoons, not just Tom and Jerry, but I don't know if either of you are active on social media, specifically Twitter, but I forget how long ago this was, but somebody had compiled a giant Twitter thread, or they had put it together, where they were showing clips from classic, different cartoons, whether it was Looney Tunes or Tom and Jerry, and then they were saying, this is the name of the song and this is the composer, because a lot of people maybe aren't as well versed on classical music. And so I was glad to hear, the little references here and there.
Yeah, it was so wonderful to get the chance to do something like that. And I know the cartoons you're referring to, you often hear William Tell quoted.
There's the famous
Figaro.
Barber Seville, the famous Bugs Bunny one. And there's a few reasons for that. One is that these evoke a period or something, but the truth of the matter is that I think the main reason is because the composers don't have time to just keep coming up with memorable stuff. And I remember some of the Animaniacs people said, no, that's one of the reasons we pull from this stuff is because there's just not time to come up with melodies, and they're just writing as fast as they can. So part of it's that, and plus the music works so fantastically. It's public domain. It's free.
I was gonna say that's the other reason they're old enough. Like you don't have to pay, any songwriters that are still around gonna knock on your door demanding a check from the.
Yeah.
My personal favorite, I forget which cartoon. Actually, it might have been a Tom and Jerry cartoon, but they used the opening. I think it was the opening from Die Fledermaus, which is my favorite opera. I know people nitpick. They're like, no, it's an operetta. But I'm like, no. I don't care about that. That's just semantics to me. But yeah, it's like very underrated, but it's so like fun to listen to. So yeah, if you do a season 2, if you can work Die Fledermaus in there, I will be very happy.
Well, we would like to do a season 2 if they do another season. That'd be great.
I was curious though, with the fact that you had, I believe you said, I think you mentioned him before, you had a story supervisor. So did that mean that all of the story premises were just given to you and then you had to expand upon them, or did you get to come up with some yourself?
No, it was. It happened 2 ways. We would either jump on a phone call and we would brainstorm ideas, or he would just say, can you come up with 5 new premises that we can pitch to Warner Brothers? And then I would pitch him the ideas. And because he's been involved in the show for 5 or 6 seasons, he was on the Tom and Jerry show. He would say, no, we've already done a cartoon that's kind of like that. Or no, I know the executives at Warner and HBO, they'll never go for a cartoon like that. So he would weed out the ones that he knew were obviously not going to go forward. And then he would pitch them to the executives at Warner. And then he would get back to me and say, okay, they went with Torch Song, or so that's the process. Yeah, I got to write all the shows that we ended up doing music for.
Was working on this project made either easier or more difficult based on the fact that there's a significantly less amount of dialogue, since a lot of times it's just Tom and Jerry in the various action pieces that they have? I mean, there's a few other characters that pop up here and there that do have dialogue, but I don't know if that affects anything of the labor of what you're doing with your jobs.
Well, in this case, it might have made it impossible, since we had to do the music first, unless the characters were singing songs. So then we could plot exactly where their dialogue is. In fact, they do sing along in Torch Song, but if people were just dialoguing and that had to happen first, or that had to happen concurrently with us figuring out the musical progression of the cartoon, I'm not sure how we would have done that. So fortunately, all of the cartoons we did, there were dialogue was maybe off screen, but we didn't have to concern ourselves too much with that. In fact, I did dialogue for one of the cartoons. I just recorded me doing the dialogue, thinking, they'll get a real actor to replace me with, and then I heard back from the producer, no, we like what you did, so we're just going to keep.
And we didn't really know what after doing that first one, it was sort of experimental. We thought we were maybe doing the best demo in the world. You know, we had my wife's a great singer. She sang Toots's part, and Keith sang some lines. I had a friend of mine who's got a great tenor voice in Nashville. He phoned it in. We had another Chris and Nikki sang on. Several friends sang, and on the first one we thought, you know, what are they going to do? Are they going to say, oh, we have our cast, we're going to re-record all these things? We didn't even know what was going to go on, what was going to happen. But no, we love those voices. Just leave them. So
I happened to be in a band with Greg's wife called California Dreamin', and it was a really vocally intensive band. They had 5 singers in it, so it just was a perfect match to have those singers just waiting over there, being able to be utilized, and several of them were SAG singers and actors. So it just worked out fantastically. Got to work with these people that are normally they just work in bands, and then suddenly, oh, I'm a studio singer. That's awesome.
And, you know, most of the studios were closed or weren't recording because it was in the middle of COVID. So we just kind of did everything one person at a time here. So kind of did it all here, and then so it worked out.
So I'm curious, I don't even know if this would be part of what you two were doing on the project, but it seems like whenever Tom has vocalizations, like he's screaming in pain or whatever because of violence, it sounds like it's the original voice from the original cartoon.
Yeah, it is. I think Bill Hanna gets a credit on this cartoon for providing screams and that sort of stuff. But you're absolutely right. Good ear. Yeah. I don't think most people would catch that, but yeah, you're absolutely right.
Well, I know that when they adapt cartoons, you know, that are classic and they do new versions of them, sometimes they'll try to get actors that can match as closely as they can. But I was listening to it, I was just going, that sounds exactly like him. Like, I mean, I've seen, you know, Tom and Jerry cartoons growing up. I'm just going, I feel like that's the same voice. But I mean, I suppose if you own the rights to the original cartoons, I suppose that's legally allowed. You've just,
right.
You know.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's charming that they continue to use the original voice for all the screams and.
I mean, it's really just a sound effect anyway. He never says anything.
Speaking of screams, correct me if I'm wrong, but is there a Wilhelm scream in this?
No, there's not. No, but oh my goodness, you just you know everything there is to know about cartoons, but there is no Wilhelm scream. No.
I forget, like there was some sort of scream sound, and I was like, is that one of those stock, like really famous screams that is just used over and over again? In one of the, I forget which one. I probably should have been more specific and being like, it was in this episode. I didn't write it down.
Well, yeah. If you were talking particularly about Torch Song, which was that's the only cartoon in the first set of the Tom and Jerry's that we did. The next ones are coming in the next batch that they release. But so you might have heard that.
Yeah, he did really good. He did one of those. The old choking sound. Yeah. What else was in there? I volunteered to do some, but we fortunately agreed that it would not be good.
In a broader sense, what attracted the two of you individually or as a team to the animation medium?
I don't know. I've always loved animation, even during the Ashman and Menken years of Disney musicals. I never missed any of those. I'd go to the theater. My first 2 features that I scored were animated films, and for me, I think it's because my first love was the symphony, and animated films are wall-to-wall music, and the better budget ones are orchestral stuff, and that was always. And I always loved all that we call them hit points. There's with animation, especially Carl Stalling took it to the nth degree with Tom and Jerry, where every movement is the orchestra is accenting, and And with animation, the music I think is more important, plays a bigger role. All that reason is why I enjoy getting into it. I started with doing some independent films, and then when Keith called me, that was my first foray into animation for television.
I made my first animated cartoon that appeared on television when I was about 13 or 14, I think. I did a Super 8. This is dating me. I did a Super 8 video, or they're not videos. I did a Super 8 film for a social studies class when I was about ninth grade, and the local TV station aired it on TV, and so by then I was just completely immersed in Disney cartoons and Looney Tunes cartoons. I'd always drawn and I'd always played guitar, and when I graduated from high school, I went to work for a couple of years trying to figure out what I was going to do next. But this was before the internet, so I didn't even know how you pursued finding an art school or a music school. And I never found an art school, but I did find a music school. So that's how I ended up coming to California. And so after I graduated, I played music for a living for a number of years. And then I got... an art school opened up just up the street from me, and took some life drawing classes there. And there was a bulletin board that had a job for assistant animators, and I called up and I took the test, and that's how I got started.
It's easy peasy, right? Easy to break in.
Do you have any thoughts about I guess sometimes it's a bit of a debate or a point of discourse of 2D animation versus 3D animation?
I still think that 2D animation is more magical. It's more magical to me to see life, to see drawings imbued with life.
Yeah, me too. I miss the 2D animation that Disney did.
But still, many of my favorite animated movies are CG. I love all the Brad Bird movies, The Incredibles, Ratatouille.
Toy Story was good.
Yeah, Toy Stories were wonderful. Many of the Pixar movies, and Tangled from Disney, I just think is an incredible movie. But then when I go back and watch 101 Dalmatians or Lady and the Tramp or Pinocchio or Alice in Wonderland, I just am delighted in a way that I haven't experienced that with CG.
Being that you two have worked together before, I believe, what is it that you like about working with each other? You know, what allows the creative collaboration to be so efficient or enjoyable that you're able to keep wanting to work together?
Well, one reason I think is he's doing that, the story and the animation, as well as then we're both doing the song together. I mean, I can't think of any other situation that's happening. I mean, how many people can storyboard, come up with story, and write this really great song, and here's the lyrics. And then we complement each other's abilities. We're both snarky. We have a kind of whacked out sense of humor. The only incompatibility is that his brain works a lot faster than my brain. having to scramble sometimes, but. We both have the same types of music. He's more versed in, he knows so many songs, from all the pop eras, and my background's a little bit more with the score and musical kind of thing. So I think it's that, and we like each other, and I don't know what else.
Yeah, well, that's the big thing, is that we would hang out even if we weren't working together. And I don't know about you, but there's lots of times when you make friends with one member of a couple, and then the other person in that couple, they're just sort of they're dragged into this friendship, whether they like it or not. But yeah, they're Greg and his wife. They're just both wonderful people, and
he met my wife before me, so that's how.
What?
Before
you met her before I met her.
Unclear antecedent there. You're right. Yeah. Yes, he met her before he met. Yeah, me. Okay.
So yeah, and we, neither of us are nasty. We both work with people that you could see how it would be impossible to collaborate with them. They're just sort of hard to be with,
and so many people are set in their ways, and I don't know. And we've been in this. We're not kids in this. We have experience about things and accepting no's from executives and all this, all that kind of thing. We don't get defensive, or if we do complain at all, we're complaining about something outside of our control. It's not us. And one main thing, it seems kind of a ridiculous thing to say, but we both seem to agree on what a better answer
is. Yeah.
I used to say when you're auditioning for a band, you should have one of the prerequisites should be knows what better is. So you'd be surprised how lacking that is. There's a dearth of knowledge of what better is around. But anyway, we tend to agree on what better is. So we don't get any kind of silly arguments about no, that's not as good as this and that kind of thing. So,
and I think we really respect how even though we might both be doing music, but there's areas where clearly I come from the pop side, Greg comes from the classical side. I'm more interested in the songwriting. Greg is, he's just as interested in songwriting, but he's also interested in the arranging and orchestration. And I'm just so happy to work with Greg, who will do all the heavy lifting on that side. So yeah, and even they're just works great.
So how did you balance making this Tom and Jerry series, I guess, be its own thing, but also sort of pay homage and maintain the kind of essence and spirit of what the original cartoons are?
Well, part of that, the credit goes to the producer-director, Daryl Van Sitters, who prepared such a concise launch package, which is to say, when I came on board, he said, these are the Tom and Jerry cartoons that we are paying homage to. And they were very specific cartoons from a very specific era of Tom and Jerry. And I have to say, Daryl prepared the artists in a way that I've done this now for 30 years, and I've never had a more detailed launch package than what Daryl prepared. So he showed examples of Disney cartoons, Tom and Jerry cartoons, and Looney Tunes cartoons, and said, "Here's how they were different." And you'll see that each of those studios had different budgets. Disney had the biggest budget. It was MGM at the time that was doing Tom and Jerry. They had the next budget, and then Warner Brothers was the cheapest. And MGM had a lot of ex-Disney animators working for them. So this is a real subtle thing, but next time you watch a Disney short now, and a classic Disney short, you'll see that it's full animation from frame one to the end of the cartoon. And at Warner Brothers, at Looney Tunes, you'll see that there's a lot of held poses, like they structured their gags to take advantage of the fact that sometimes it's really funny just having a character stand there and not react. And like there's a Daffy Duck cartoon with the Shropshire Slasher, where Daffy Duck is just manically interacting with the Shropshire Slasher, and the Slasher is just standing there, and it's a single drawing, so it's not costing anything to just keep photographing that same drawing over and over and over again. And then the Tom and Jerry's, they're somewhere in the middle, where characters don't zip out of screen, which is like you see some blur lines and a puff of smoke. They always do a little scramble first, and then they run out. And this is because they had bigger budgets; they could do these sorts of things. So that's really the answer to that. Is Daryl did a great job imparting all of that information to all of the artists that were going to work on it.
And one thing that's interesting to me that I didn't know about this genre, with it because of the demographic, there's certain, Tom and Jerry, I wouldn't say violent, but it approaches right. It's action and a lot of hitting and stuff, but there's certain gags of punching and all that stuff that you can't do. There's like this huge list evidently somewhere of things. No, we can't do that. No, you can't use a gun, or no, you can't. Whatever. It's interesting that there's a lot of kind of built-in rules, right? You kind of find out sometimes when you just try something and then they say no, we can't do that.
Yeah. So there are things that can't be done in cartoons anymore, but then it's just up to the creators of the new cartoons to try to say, well, what's the essence of the old cartoons? We know we can't have a gun in Tom and Jerry anymore, but what can we do that serves the same purpose, can get the same laugh, can still entertain people, but it's not going to involve a gun.
You're right.
So, yeah,
But the anvil's still good, right? You can still drop an anvil on something. That's totally fine. Because people don't have anvils lying around. So.
Do you think that the industry in general should invest in more animation projects? And I don't know, maybe it's also a good time. Maybe animation is easier to do while maintaining more social distancing. I don't know everything that went into making it.
Yes, I think they should stop making any live action and put all the money into making.
And they should be musicals. They should be songs.
They should all cartoons should have music and.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So yeah, I think they are ramping up. There seems to be a lot of animation.
Yeah, there's the big problem in animation right now is finding people to do the work. There's so much work.
And when we started on the series, everything else had been canceled. I mean, there wasn't any production going on, but we were just so busy doing this because they did the test and Tom and Jerry could not get COVID. It was impossible. so it was no problem.
I'm not super well read up on all of the ongoings, but it seems like some animation studios have struggled like financially and maybe to the point of them closing down. So that's why I wasn't sure if you felt like, okay, now's the time to let's, reinvigorate and come back strong,
I don't think there's a shortage of production. There may be studios that are struggling for one reason or another. I don't have any answers to that. I guess the box office hasn't really recovered yet. They're not seeing the mega blockbusters. So perhaps on that end of things, there might be concern. But I think it's fair to say that people stopped going to the movie theaters because of COVID, but that hasn't stopped them streaming cartoons or watching cartoons on television. So yeah, it seems like there's lots of production going on. Just
to wrap things up, what do you hope that people will get out of watching your series?
A manic need to have more Keith and Greg songs in cartoons.
And to contact other people and have other people talk to other people about doing more.
It was a fun trip down memory lane, so to speak, even though it's a new series, just because it's been, I don't know how long since I last watched any Tom and Jerry cartoons. So, it was fun to see it brought back. And I think it really was effective in maintaining a lot of the essence of what the original cartoons were. So it doesn't feel like a weird alien thing that's, existing just because somebody said it should exist. So.
It's really wonderful to hear and appreciate you saying that. It was very important to us to make these cartoons be authentic Tom and Jerry's, not just some generic cartoon that happened to be painted the same color as Tom and Jerry.